So I'd like to share with you just a little bit of background of what the Roundtable is for those of you who it is your first time coming to the Roundtable. Um, let's begin. Okay. So please give me a thumbs up, Angie and Chelsea, if you can see my screen. Okay, great. Um, The School of Story Design has been launched, as you guys know. So some of you might be joining from the Eventbrite invitation. That's fine. From going forward, though, all of these will be hosted through the School of Story Design. The School of Story Design is created by neetastory.com, which is my company, and it's going to be a kind of a hub for all things storytelling. So when you joined, you came through the School of Story Design website, and I'm just going to do that because I want to show you something. So here's my homepage. Your homepage should actually have your name up there. And when you go to the Me Dropbox and you hit profile, that's where all the courses you've registered will appear. You can also go to the courses page, and you'll see that we have courses for leaders. We also have courses for instructional designers, because leaders actually need to be good storytellers as well. Most of what you're going to see right now is courses for instructional designers, and there's ours, the Stories and Microlearning Roundtable, and that's what we're here today to discuss. Next month, we have the Instructional Story Design Workshop coming up. It's a 2-day thing for 3 hours each day. If you're interested in learning Beyond, we have a workshop on how to really bring your stories to life through Beyond, and it's a very hands-on. We create it together in the session. And then in April, we have another workshop, and then August, another roundtable. So if you are interested in continuing these conversations, go ahead and sign up for the next roundtable on the courses page. And if you are a leader or you know leaders who want to get better at storytelling, then we have the cohort for those guys too. And then I want to show you also, because especially if you join one of the workshops, there is this wonderful part of the school, which is you can see, who else is in the class. But here's this discuss tab, and we can connect with one another outside of the workshop or of the call. So if you meet somebody today that you want to get in touch with them, you can either go to the learners here and find them and then direct message them, or you can mention them in the discussion. If you saw something today that you want to, like, hey, I didn't quite catch that, and I didn't have a chance to ask that question. You can ask questions here after this session. You can post things that little aha moments here, and we can continue to learn from one another. And so this particular roundtable will stay active then for about 30 days, and I'll also post the recording on here on this path. So here we have prep for the event. So those of you who saw the orientation video, the welcome, the rules of engagement, and then the join, and then you can, here's another little kind of thank you from me at the end. And down here is where we will post the recordings. So I just want to give you a little orientation, because the school is brand new, and I just want to do some educating before for those who are new to our school. All right, now let's get into stories and microlearning. And as a way of introduction, I have created a video for you. So let's watch the video, and afterwards, we're going to have a breakout session, and I'm going to give you some things to talk about.
Our professional staff don't have time for a learning event, so we need something bite-sized. On-demand training when and where they need it most.
Our learning programs need to align with modern science.
Indeed, our programs are too long.
Way too long. Hi, I've got this 400 slide deck that needs to be broken up into 4-minute training bits. I love that! Training bits. That's what we'll call them. Training bits.
The average human has the attention span of a goldfish.
No, that's not true anymore.
I got that from a very reputable source.
It's actually less than a goldfish now.
Our leaders don't have time to do a 2-day development retreat anymore, and there's no way we're converting it to virtual. No way. So I'd like for you to develop a leadership program that leaders can take in small doses. What were we just talking about?
Goldfish.
Right. Have you heard of microlearning? I just read an article on it. I'd like for our company to get up to speed on the latest learning trends.
We now have the attention span of a fruit fly.
Seriously?
2 seconds.
Since we don't really have time to develop a full-out course on empathy, let's do microlearning instead. That's it. We need 2-second courses.
I think we can cover 3 or 4 learning objectives in that amount of time.
Okay, I'm glad you're laughing and not crying. So there are, what audio tool do you use for the voices? I use a microphone. Those are all my voices. I do have a degree in acting, so that does help a little bit. There are a lot, microlearning is an awesome tool when it's an appropriate tool. But there are a lot of misconceptions about mobile learning, about gamification, about scenario design, about VR, and even about stories. And the same is true for microlearning. There are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of strange ideas about what microlearning is and when it's appropriate. And a lot of times I think that folks get maybe on the latest bandwagon. They're like, just, hey, let's do this because it's the latest thing. But let's really look at the uses of microlearning and how beneficial they can be to us, that microlearning can be to us when it's appropriate. And when you think about what all of these stakeholders were saying in this video, they were basically saying, we want training, right? They're just putting micro in front of it. Micro trending, yes, Benoit. And so as consultants and as designers, it's our job to make sure, okay, well, what's the root problem? What's the business outcome? And is training the right solution to begin with? But assuming that the solution is training, and that training can actually make a difference in new knowledge, new skills, and new attitudes, when is it appropriate for micro learning? And so I want to do a breakout, and I would like for you to talk about 3 things. I'd like you to give one use case for microlearning that definitely a benefit in this case. Give one non-use case of microlearning when microlearning would not be an appropriate strategy. And then lastly, talk as a group about one or 2 guiding principles that can help us as a team, as a group here on this call, to guide us through when microlearning seems to be the right solution. Yes, Christine. Heck, is even microlearning the appropriate delivery strategy? Right, so that's what we're going to talk about. What is a good delivery strategy for microlearning? When is it not a good delivery strategy? And what's one guiding principle that we as a group, you as a team in your breakouts, can share with the rest of us when we come back to the main room? So I'm going to break you into groups. Let me stop sharing for a moment. You've got those 3 things, right? Use case, non-use case, and a guiding principle. And when we come back, I'd like for a representative from your group to just 1, 2, 3, put your answers in the chat so that we can all benefit from what everyone has discussed. Right. So I'm going to, how many of us are on this? 16. So I'm going to break us out into 4 breakout rooms, and you'll have 4 people in your room. And I will see you in 8 minutes. You've got 8 minutes to discuss those 3 things, and we'll come back at the end of that. All right, any questions?
Nope.
All right, I'll see you on the other side. Cool, so as you are coming back, go ahead and put your 1, 2, 3s in the chat. And I'd like to hear just if anybody wants to share a use case with the rest of us as folks are typing in. Would love to just talk about some of those use cases. Would anybody like to volunteer?
I can share for our group.
Thank
So
you,
we had
Sarah.
talked, we talked about for like the use cases, and I'm sure Chelsea is putting those into the chat too, but for like easy to understand kind of information, so that like it's not very complicated and it's something that they can easily pick up for like a use case anyhow.
Okay. Okay, so ease of learning.
Mhm.
That's what it looks like Sierra is writing here too. Low level, novice learning, refresher training, non-compliance, quick repair, troubleshooting, DIY, recipes, new HR benefit feature. Good. And then what about, thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. What about the non-use case? What did y'all talk about there?
In our group, we talked about when safety is a factor and competency needs to be demonstrated.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
Well, I'll speak for our group. This is Sarah Harris. So one of the non-use cases we thought would be like compliance training that has to have a certain amount of information, whether it's regulatory or state or, government related. We thought there might be so much that has to go into the module. There's just no way. You might have 100 small micro-learning modules to try and get you to where you had everything in there that you needed.
Are you saying that compliance stakeholders want to throw everything in the kitchen sink into the course? Is that what you're saying? Okay, good. Complicated compliance requires a lot of backstory. So Chelsea says, number 1, concept. Okay, so that's what Sarah was saying, and then requires to use more interactivity or a bigger discussion. And number 3, a guiding principle, a way to weave a story into what we want to discuss, quick hit to get them the info, easy, accessible, and valuable knowledge. Anybody else have a guiding principle for us? Standalone, accessible via multiple devices. Yes.
Yeah, we had one which was focused on one learning outcome or one topic well, rather than a lot of things within the learning.
Yeah, so covering one action at a time, right? So those of you who have read instructional story design know that I call it an action list. And the action list is the list of actions that learners should perform, right? And so if you have an action list of 40 items, then the micro learning could be that you just cover one of those 40 in that module, and so you have covered all 40 of them. Good. Consider the audience. Does the training require a minimum time for credit hours? Use chunking. It will need to be changed. Will it need to be changed often? Good. Thank you, Angie. Those are great considerations and guiding principles for us.
I'd like to add learning in the flow of work.
Yes. That's a great benefit, right, of microlearning, learning in the flow of work at on demand at the time of need. A wonderful use for microlearning. So microlearning does have, despite some of the misconceptions about what it is, it does have some very beneficial applications. And when microlearning is to be used, really comes down to the design, right? I mean, we're designers, and we're designing for a solution, and we should know, okay, the situation and the design of this course really needs to be in short chunks. It needs to be one, action at a time. It needs to be accessible to our learning audience via mobile. All those kinds of choices that are being made are part of that design. And so it's not a slap on. It's not like, it's just like in gamification, you're not just slapping a Jeopardy game on it, right? It has to be essential to the design of the training itself. Awesome. Any other insights that you want to offer before we move on to the story part? Anybody? I'm going to copy these chat notes, make them available to you, on the school site.
I think the whole thing about like microlearning is short is a little bit not gonna say like perceptional or different from one person to the other, but usually people say, okay, so the video doesn't have to exceed 3 minutes. Well, if the video is entertaining and interactive, for instance, if you have a video that you created on Camtasia and it has like hotspots and it has a branching scenario and it can take you into different thoughts and can make you have like different decisions to be taken. And it's interesting. It's something that you can go through, and you know what? By the time you're done with it, you've exhausted or basically enjoyed 10 minutes, for instance, or like 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's still microlearning. It was still a reinforcement or a performance support or something for a course augmentation. It's still a video, not 3 minutes. It took 15 minutes, but it did satisfy the performance objective that you were aiming towards. So sometimes people fall into the limbo of, oh, I should make it less than 5 minutes or like 3 minutes, whatever the type of microlearning it is, just to satisfy the notion that this is what is considered to be a chunk of microlearning.
Right.
That's all.
That's a great point, Mo. And I think that we do tend to say, okay, what's the formula? What's the formula? How long should it be? How long is it before it's not microlearning anymore? Who cares?
Oh, it's not how short it is, it's how you use it.
That's right, Benoit. Thank you. Thank you.
And
Is it appropriate in the design?
Too.
Yes.
The quality, I'm very glad that was brought up. And it makes me think of like a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
If we grab their attention, which is their interest, and no matter how long that takes, the quantity I don't think matters so much as the quality. So that was a really good point that was brought up.
Excellent, Jennifer.
Something that people always say there's a video fatigue, but look at the people that binge like 6 hours straight on Netflix. Okay, it's not video fatigue. You're just bored. Or if you're entertained, you'll stay there. That's basically it.
That's right. And the quality, the time, all of that, really, it comes down to the design. It comes down to the design. Did you design it? Do you know who your audience is? Right. And the book really brings this out. Know your audience. Know your audience. Create an audience profile. That is the only time you will be able to create learning that truly meets the learning need, is when you know who your audience is and what you want them to do as a result of training. If you got those two things under your belt, not only can you design training, but you can design stories, really great stories. So let's talk about the story part. All right. I will share one more time here. Thank you for sharing those use cases, those non-use cases, and a guiding principle. I think you're reasonable people. You're not giving cookie cutter answers. So awesome. A great book on this is called Microlearning, Short and Sweet. The book is short and sweet, and the information in it also is just really sweet. Carl's a good friend of mine, and so is Robin. That's not why I'm promoting their book, but I just really enjoy it. It's got some great things like what Mo was talking about, like how long and all that stuff, that it really does come down to the design. So highly recommend that. They are amazing peeps, Mo. So for those of you who are new to instructional story design, then let me just give you a brief kind of tutorial overview of what it is. I tie story design to an instructional design model that all of us use in some form or another. So these 5 attributes of instruction, of developing instruction, you guys know what they are. What's the A? What does A stand for?
Analysis.
Yes. And the first D?
Develop.
Design.
Oh, shoot.
Then develop.
Sorry about that. Dang it. I always get those
You
two
are
confused.
X'd off this call. You can't join anymore. No, I'm kidding.
Darn it.
Okay, it's not waterfall.
The
proud.
I, what's the I?
Implementation.
Implementation.
Right. And the last?
You
E?
Evaluation.
Evaluation.
Evaluate. Excellent. So the analysis, now that's our instructional design kind of, methodology. These components are there no matter if you're using it, cyclically or however, or if you're doing it linearly, those elements are going to be in any kind of project that you're doing for training. So in the analysis phase, let's talk about story design now. How does story design fit with instructional design? So during the analysis phase, you're discovering the story. So the work that you're doing as an instructional designer, you're getting that audience profile, you're getting that action list ready, and you are discovering the story. What's really going on out there? There's real people out there. They have a real problem in the real world, and you're discovering what that story is. Then design. In the design phase of instruction, you're also designing your story. In fact, I encourage people to design the story first before designing the instruction, because when you design the story first, it opens up all of these activities that were never possible without it. I'll give you an example of that. Then develop and implement, I kind of lump those together as deliver. You're delivering the story, you're producing it and making it available within the training course or as an independent video, however that story is being developed. So those are the 3 phases of story design and how they align with instructional design: discover, design, and deliver. And then evaluation, of course, is evaluating the effectiveness of your analysis and your design. Did you do it? Did you do the analysis right? Did you design the right solution? And so we're not going to talk about evaluation today, but this the story design process will give you some key things to evaluate the effectiveness of your story. All right, so let's look at the heart of story design. All right, this is at the very core of it. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect the story to the action that we want people to take as a result of training. And there are 2 story elements that we're going to focus on. Just real quick, what are the elements of a story? What makes a story a story?
Players.
Emotion.
Heroes.
Conflict.
Emotions.
Conflict.
A likable
Conflict.
character.
A likable character. Plot.
Resolution.
Punchline.
Resolution.
Yes. Resolution.
Climaxes.
Yes. Good. Well, you guys have identified the 2 that we're going to focus on for a story for training. And the first one of those is relatable characters. Relatable characters. And I use the word relatable because the characters need to have, the learners need to have some sort of empathy with those characters.
Good
And
point, Rance. Why else would Disney movies succeed for so long?
Yeah. And where do we get those relatable characters? We get them by studying our audience profile. That's why it's so important to get to know who our audience is. And then the second element of the story is strong conflict. And I use another adjective here, and it's strong, because I want to remind all of us that conflict is necessary in our stories. And it needs to be as strong as possible. So we're going to take our relatable characters and put them into strong conflict with our action list. And that action list is the list of actions that we're asking learners to do as a result of training. And when we put these relatable characters into strong conflict, something wonderful happens inside of the listener, the watcher of that story. It creates within them a desire for resolution. And that's where they want to be. That's where we want them to be, for sure. But when we are engaged in a story, we want to have that desire for resolution. What happens next? How do they get out of this situation? And the story for training brings the learner up to that point of desire for resolution and kind of leaves them there for a minute. Now, there's still a gap between the story and the action, so let's fill that. And that is where the training comes in. All right, so this is the heart of story design. The story elements of relatable characters and strong conflict produce a desire for resolution. That's your evaluation right there. When you share your story with somebody, ask them, do you really relate to these characters? Do you have a desire for resolution? If they don't, probably the conflict is not very strong. It needs to be amped up a bit, or the characters aren't in alignment with the audience profile. Then your training comes in, and that is what connects the story to the action. Would be better if we had the backstory of the Titans and his love for Lady Death, though. Backstories can be helpful, or they can also get in the way when it comes to training, especially if we're doing microlearning. The stories are going to tend to be on the shorter side. That doesn't mean the characters can't be relatable, though. I'd like to show you an example of that. So let me share with you just a structure to keep in mind for how you structure a story design course, whether it's microlearning or otherwise. And then we're going to apply this model or this flow to different ways of designing microlearning. So begin with the story. Tell the story. How do you tell that story? Well, you can just tell it with your voice. You can put the text on a screen. You can pair the text with photographs. You can add audio to that slide. You can make a video of the story. Really, the development of the story is so less important than the design of the story. The story, if it's designed well, is going to have its impact, whether you produce it simply or with a lot of complexity. After the story, give the learner time to reflect. And I encourage designers to ask a reflection question that helps the learner recall the emotion from the story. It is a documented fact that we cannot make decisions and we cannot incorporate new knowledge, skills, and emotions only with facts. We have to have some emotional input. And when we starve our learners from emotional input, we're really crippling them from completely embracing and acting on the training. So have them reflect on the emotion from the story. And then the next step, give them something to solve. Notice we haven't told them anything yet about content. We haven't taught them anything as like, tell then test. So tell them a story, give them a reflection question, then give them something to solve. And lastly, this is where the training comes in, really. This is the feedback that you give them after they have attempted to solve. All right, now I'm going to show you an example of this model. And the learners for this course are cashiers at a casino, and it's compliance training. I know that you said don't use them for compliance, but this is a compliance example. So I'm going to share a story. I'm going to ask a reflect question. I'm going to ask you to solve for something, and then you're going to get feedback. So you ready to see it? The story is really short. So let's start with that. And please let me know when I start this video. Just somebody type in the chat, I can hear it if you can hear it, please.
Hi, Shelley. This is Ms. Bexley. She's one of our VIPs. She's ready to cash out her winnings.
Hi, Miss Bexley.
Here's my ticket.
May I see your driver's license?
Sure, here it is.
Hope you've enjoyed your evening, Miss Bexley.
I sure have. It's great having the summers off.
Oh, really? What do you do?
I'm an elementary school teacher.
Oh, how long have you been teaching?
5 years.
Okay. So after the story, then the learner would see the screen. How do you feel about this interaction? Good, Shelley's doing a great job connecting with the customer. Uncomfortable, something doesn't seem right. So if they select, good, Shelley is doing a great job connecting with the customer, we go to this. True, Shelley connects with the customer, but she also notices something, and what is it? That's right, Chris, it's an ethical dilemma, right? Pretty short and sweet. Now, if they had clicked on they're uncomfortable, then it would go to this slide. What doesn't feel right? Right, so Shelley notices that the name on Ms. Bexley's driver's license doesn't match. Shelley notices that the amount of the ticket doesn't match Ms. Bexley's occupation, or Shelley notices that Ms. Bexley has the summers off. Which one of those things doesn't feel right? So yes, then the feedback, it's a little odd that Ms. Bexley is able to afford VIP status on a teacher's salary. What should Shelley do? And then of course from here, depending on which one they chose, it would give them the steps to take in a situation like this. And the advantage of this flow is that the story itself contains really what's needed for behavior change, because the conflict, it leads us right up to that point of conflict. And when that cashier is in that situation, and of course the point of this whole thing is get to know who your customers are, and if you see something that doesn't match, then report it. And this is a specific example of one of those dilemmas where that could be the case. And this would take them, I don't know, at the most 5 minutes to get through the entire interaction, made available on their phone, taking it as they have time. It could be sent out, at a certain time. And this short piece of learning then could serve as oh my goodness, performance support. We were talking at the beginning, I forgot your name. It could serve as performance support on the job in the moment. And that is an example of this flow. So we have the story, we have reflect, we have solve, and we have feedback. So let me stop there for a moment and ask for your response to that.
I'm curious about the law in casino. So she shouldn't take the money. She should get the money. You got me on. Got me excited about the answer now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's in this particular case, she would cash out and then just report it.
Okay.
So, did you get it right? Good. So yeah, it's and that's a good point, Benoit, is that in these kinds of stories, it just opens up so many opportunities for wonderful distractor options in your questions, things that could be correct, and things that aren't. I mean, because life is not black and white, man. It's like gray. So stories are great at getting at all those little gray areas and helping to bring those out and give people an option to make a mistake like that. Like Sierra says, enhance deeper learning opportunities, because now it's not just like, if this happens, then you do this. It's putting them in the situation so that they're able to like make real decisions like they're going to have to in the real world. So I'm glad you brought that out, Benoit. So Juan says, how do you give the time to reflect in the micro learning? So as you saw in this example, Juan Manuel, the reflection question was just a simple multiple choice, right? It's just causing them to think back at the story and consider what's happening in the story, particularly on the emotional piece of the story. So it doesn't have to be a long reflection. Good. I love this. I could use this for certain topics that deal with recording and reporting at a financial. Yep, that's right, Chelsea. Forces people to think about the resolution. That's a very good point, Sanya. Oh, it's good to see you, Sanya.
Hi there.
Hi, it's great to see your S on the screen. Oh, there you are. But yeah, it forces us to think about the resolution because the story has brought us up to that point, but it hasn't resolved it for us, right? So we have to actually think. Oh my gosh, critical thinking in a course? Are you kidding me? Yes, that's what the story does for us. It causes us to think. Benoit, you're coming up with all sorts of great words here. Micro reflection. Awesome.
It also reinforces the fact that a story doesn't have to be complicated to result into learning.
That's correct. And then what if we saw, and this was the case in this particular solution, that we kept seeing Shelley in these different situations, And we kind of get to know her over the course of all these micro learning events, right? And we get to know other staff at the casino as well. And then let's see, can reflection be through answering questions throughout the story? Yes, Mo. Enforce the core feedback loop. Yeah, absolutely. I put it right after the story in this case because it's hot. It's like right at the top of their mind, and I want to capitalize on that that uneasiness that they feel at the end, and have them think about that, and then get them thinking about solving. Awesome. Build character connection. Yeah. So microlearning is also a great place for like recurring characters. I could connect with either of the characters. Yeah, it's because it's real, right? It's like a real scenario. It's like, it's not like this person is a baddie, you know, who only does bad things and they're trying to cheat the casino, right? You know, she's a normal person, and maybe she's just in a situation where she's like cutting some corners. It's good. Christine, it's like when we're watching a movie, we wonder if certain characters are going to do certain actions, like if Batman will ever kill Joker, or if Thanos' reasoning was understandable. Yeah. So yeah, and making them real, and you see a lot of that in the kind of like the hero type movies, the superheroes, like they're trying to make them like more human. They have this dark side or this other side of them, like to make them more. Of course, I don't know. It's still not very realistic. A lot of those stories. But yeah, so like creating real people for your characters is so good, you know, and that's why I encourage people not to come up with names like, you know, Tammy talks a lot or something like that. Just name her Tammy, and we'll get it. We'll get that she's a bit of a gossip, you know. Awesome. All right, any other insights that you'd like to share with the group about tying stories to microlearning? I'm going to share with you a few possibilities with stories and microlearning here. But any other insights that you want to share? All right. So there's a couple of ways that stories can be kind of integrated with microlearning. So the example that I showed is the one that I'm going to show first here. You have this small little module of story, reflect, solve, feedback. And then you have another module of story, reflect, solve, feedback, and then another one, and then another one, until you have covered all the actions on your action list. That's right, Christine, to be careful on using stereotypes when writing your relatable character. That's right. This scenario debunks the suggestion that I made that microlearning shouldn't be used for complex ideas and concepts. So there's always going to be like a surprise, right? What makes sense to us, we can't do this, it's too complicated, right? So there actually might be a viable solution for microlearning for something more complex. Excellent. So this is one way that microlearning could be set up. You have this, these series, right? These stories, and maybe this story is kind of like ongoing from module to module, and it continues on, and maybe it leaves you kind of at a cliffhanger at the end, you know, or leads into the next one, or we follow a character or a set of characters throughout that. I remember going to a conference and Carl Kopp was there, and I went to his session on gamification, surprise, surprise. And Carl said, you know, there are some inherent pitfalls with microlearning in that people can get lost in it. You know, people can start losing interest in it. And as he was saying these things in my head, I was going, but yeah, stories can fix that. And then his next words were, games can fix that. So there's multiple solutions, right? To like maintaining that attention throughout a set of microlearning modules. For me, it's going to be stories every time, because the stories, we're hooked on them, right? Angie says, I once created a series of microlearning that followed the same character over 1 year period of time. The client kept insisting that we change this character's clothing. I insisted that you do not change cartoon characters' clothing. Thoughts? I'll share my thoughts with you, Angie. I agree with you. You don't really need to change clothing. Unless it is like, they're at the beach now, or they're doing something special. I think it's okay. If it's an animated character, I think that's totally acceptable. And even if it's not, people suspend their disbelief enough to do that. If they're paying attention. But if you're a detailed person, you want to change those clothes, you go for it. Go for it. Change those clothes. Okay, now this is another kind of possibility for microlearning, is that you have the story, the full out story in one module. And then you have, these other modules for reflecting on that story, solving, feedback. This is a little less optimal in my view. It can be done, but the microlearning modules would be kind of, each of the components of instruction would be parsed out. I like this one, where you have a module that is just story and reflect, right? And so it's a bit of a longer story and a reflection. And then within the entire curriculum, then you have these little solves and feedbacks that keep referring back to that story. So I like this one, and I like the first one, because they both maintain that cohesiveness, and the story is so integral in each one of them. So of these models, what kind of ideas do you guys have for possibly executing storytelling in a microlearning module? Any insights, any ideas? Is this sparking some ideas? Is this giving you some insights into, I'm going to use this in my next project? Advice on using interactive stories versus one-way non-interactive stories. So Chris, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you mean by interactive stories.
I'm talking about the one that you showed where the user or the learner had to select something versus just receive mode only, where they're only watching and listening.
I see. Yeah, so the story itself is kind of a standalone, but then it's followed up with these interactions. So absolutely 100%, make them think, make them make choices. They should be involved. Just like with any training course, the more they're involved in critical thinking, the more they're involved in making choices and getting feedback on those choices, they're gonna master the skills better. That's right, Sierra. Show, don't tell. And stories are an awesome way to show rather than tell. Thank you for that question, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I have a question, Michelle. I was curious if anyone has used storytelling for like onboarding. Like I'm working on a bunch of onboarding projects, and I have some micro learnings that I'm giving, but they're not complicated. It's like giving them benefits information. I'm giving them like how to find resources on the internet that we have available, things like that. So like, is it worth building a story around that to make it more interesting, or do I just give them a 3-minute video that shows them how to access the internet?
So it sounds like, Sierra, you have some experience with that. Is that true?
Yeah, just you talked about that. I used to do a lot of the onboarding for the previous company. But again, if you're just sharing information, is it really a video or a story that they need to do? Or is it just simply a learning aid? Here's a checklist. Have you gone through it? Because it's more informational. it's something that they need later on. So that's what I've done. When it comes to onboarding, it's around specific skills. So I did a lot around customer service, and some management, some leadership stuff. And that's where I focus the energies there. So rather than having everything as a, an e-learn or learning, that the onboarding was like 2 weeks long, quite complex, a lot of information. We focused and said, actually, what can we give some of them? Just a checklist, go off in your own time, give them specified learning times and say, okay, we're going to go through handling a call, and that would be kind of story and role play and a lot of that, and you're the character rather than anything else, and use those kind of more kind of tick boxy things where it's stored on a KB and you just want to make sure they know where to find it. That sort of stuff maybe doesn't resonate well as a story, unless you want to kind of bring Mary has started a new job and you're bringing her through and she asks you, oh, I'm really stuck. Where can I find, information about my health insurance or my pension or that, and that they bring them on that journey. And then that makes them go kind of like like a treasure hunt, where they go off and find that information and then come back and, use that then to bring a story. So that's worked well. I hope that helps.
That's great, Ciara. And I think that really does bring to light, like, it brings us back to design. What's the best solution here for what they need? It could be just a job aid, a checklist, for that. Or it could be a full out, story. So we're at the end of our time together, but if your questions didn't get answered, I'd like for you to post those questions within the discuss tab of this course in the School of Story Design. So if you joined here from the School of Story Design, you registered for this roundtable there, go to the course itself, click on the discuss tab and post your question there, and I'll make sure that I answer it. You can go to, and if you didn't, if you registered on Eventbrite, go to schoolofstorydesign.com. You can still register for this roundtable. I'm going to keep it up for the rest of the day. And then you can go to the course itself, click on the discuss tab and put your question there. And we can keep talking with one another throughout. You can also tag people by mentioning them. They'll get a notice about it. So it's great to see all of you. Great to spend this time with you. Sign up for the next roundtable on August 30th for script writing. And we also have some workshops coming up next month. So I would love to see you online there too. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining the roundtable.